Oh, good. And we're recording. So I shared the PowerPoint with y'all in my announcement and email that went out yesterday. This is a very kind of short, sweet, cut and dry, but I think it is very important because we do come across a lot of these issues in school, especially in public school. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we're going to get to the top of this here. Okay, does everybody see that? Oh, how about now? Does everybody see that? Good, good. Okay, and let's do this over here. Okay, perfect. I finally have my setup. So I've got my keyboard, my mouse, and my additional display. So if you see me looking that way, it's because I'm reading, not because I'm ignoring, okay? Unless it is, but it's probably not. Okay, so here we go. Housekeeping, we just went through that. Okay, so the discussion, the module 3 discussion. So the big thing here, before we even get into this discussion, is talking about religion in schools. And last week I mentioned, as long as there's testing, there will always be prayer in school. It's just a question of how formal or informal it is. Now, within the past decade, we have added an acceptable moment of silence, actually more than 10 years, it's probably been 15 now, a moment of silent reflection to be part of the morning announcements in most schools, or in any school that chooses to do a morning announcement. They are allowed to, without any need to ask permission, have a moment of silence. Not a moment of prayer, although that might be what it is. They call it a moment of silent reflection. In addition to the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll get into the Pledge of Allegiance later because that is a fascinating, fascinating story, which most music teachers probably know the whole story about it, but I may get into it anyway. But that moment of silence, before we start our discussion, by a show of hands, does your school do a moment of silence daily? Okay. Some say they do, some say they don't. Okay. Tammy, has it ever been brought up? I know the school system that you're at is a little bit more rural, correct?
It is rural.
Okay. What do they do if they don't do a moment of silence? Do they do anything?
No, we used to have like a school-wide video that would play,
Mhm.
that would have the Pledge of Allegiance, that would have the Star Spangled Banner and have a moment of silence. And they've taken it all away. The kids don't even know how to do the pledge.
Mm. And to the real publics for Richard stands, right? Uh,
Yeah, I've taught the pledge in my class.
yeah, same. Um, And that was, by the way, real stuff said by real kids in a class. And to the real publics for Richard stands, one nation under God, invisible, right? And anyway, very funny stuff. But anyway, I pledge of allegiance. No, it's just I pledge allegiance. But again, so many things and semantics in there. Getting back onto a moment of silence. Now, isn't it interesting that the pledge is not the issue or concern? It's the moment of silence, if it is brought up or not. In the pledge, one of my favorite speeches that I've heard, comedian slash clown Red Skelton. Have you ever heard his thing in the 50s that he did about taking under God out of the Pledge of Allegiance? It's beautiful. He says, the minute we take out one nation under God, there's no reason to say the pledge anyway. It's kind of beautiful. So again, bringing that point up, we do say, if you say the pledge, one nation under God. We don't require them to say the pledge, but we also say that they're not allowed to do an open prayer. It's kind of, well, it kind of goes both ways, right? So that being said, and I don't necessarily think that there's a right or a wrong on this. I think that what we do as educators meets the need of our community that we serve. And that's hard to feel out. You really have to know your people. But that will bring us into our first discussion. So here we are. Social studies teacher recently gave an assignment to middle school students to research a religion of any culture that had been studied in class. A group of students chose to study Islam. One student's parents became angry when they learned about the assignment and called to meet with you. They claimed that the teacher had no right to promote other religions in school and would like for you to investigate. They state that they will go to the school board and the media if this assignment is not dropped from the class. If you were the principal, what would you do in this situation? Okay, we're going to start by opening this up to everybody, and then we can break it into some groups to have some conversation. Amanda, what you got?
So a lot of this parallels with the dissection of the frog kind of scenario that people
Yes.
have. The first thing that I would do as the administrator is pull up assuming we're in Georgia, pull up the Georgia performance standards and list out the standards where students are learning about these different cultures and religions. And based on the prop, it looks like the students chose to study Islam. There were probably there were different religions they could have studied. They could have studied Judaism. They could have studied Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Greek Orthodox. There could have been a number of religions studied, but they probably just chose this one because that's what they wanted to do. So that's kind of where I would start that conversation. I would definitely not leave the teacher alone for that conference whatsoever as a principal.
Yes. Okay. So let's break down a couple of this for you. So said that had been studied in class. So they've already studied these cultures in class. They are going actually DOK level 3 at this point, right? And they're going deeper in based on their curiosity of what they would like to know more about. That covers what's already being met by the standards, right? They're digging in deeper. They should be, in my opinion, commended for digging in deeper. And yes, the students, the way this reads, the students selected that. A group of students chose to study. Okay. One student's parents became angry. Okay. First thing as a principal, I would say is, were you aware that your child chose this? Because if you're aware that your child selected that as the thing that they wanted to study, that's a conversation between parent and child, not between school board or community or media or any of that other nonsense. That's a parent that wants $5,000 off a court case. You know, that's the magic number, right?
Well, because that parent also, it says that they have an issue with the assignment, that particular assignment, not that they've learned about these in class at all. It's the assignment where they get to dig deeper. So, I mean, based on our book on page 63, it's talking about Texas enacting a law allowing religious beliefs to be expressed in homework and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, it's still not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
But
Matthew.
Looking at it further, it said that they had no right to promote other religions. So which means it's okay to promote your religion, but not other religions. So I think that goes back to question, you know, the parents' issue with the assignment. You know, the fact that if it fits you, then you're fine with it. But again, the student Also, the parent should have seen like a syllabus or a course handout or something from the beginning of the year that they saw this assignment coming up. And if they signed off on it saying that they had that, then, you know, it's that could also be something to address. So,
Yeah. A few years ago, there was, and this is aside from the religion thing, and we're going to get to that. Brittany, I see your hands up. I'm going to get you in just a second, okay? Where'd you go? There you are. Okay, Brittany, you good with that? Okay. A couple of years ago, right before COVID, the state of Georgia gave the option for standardized testing that a parent could opt out of the test. That was not a big groundswell. That was just okay, yeah, I guess you can do that. But then it was taken to the community by parents who wanted to opt out for their child. And then there was a lot of people in pockets that chose to opt out because that was now available. Was it best for kids? It didn't matter. It was what you could do. As time has gone on, that really only lasted about a year. Within another year, pretty much, the kids were no longer opting out. But say, with an assignment, can you opt out of an assignment? Well, as soon as that precedent is set, you are handing over the quality of your education to people that are no longer or are not educators. That's a very slippery slope. So Brittany had a question or a statement. Let's hear that.
I was just going to say that anytime like I go into a parent meeting, we know that we give them syllabus and we know that we kind of break down the units and we know that they probably don't look at it. They just sign it. And half the time, especially depending on what grade you're teaching, they're not even signing it. Their kid is signing it and bringing it back. But what I was going to say was if I was sitting in the meeting with the parent and the administrator, like I try to go ahead and just come up with the alternate or what they could do versus even going into the whole technicality of everything. Because it's not my fault you didn't educate yourself on what your kid is learning. But I would, make it clear and say, just keep in mind that this was a choice. So what would you like your child to do? And that's definitely an option. They don't have to do such and such. Just keep in mind that if it is a group assignment, those other students can continue with that religion and they may be doing it independently. And that's totally fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting when we talk about choice and parental involvement. Brittany teaches high school. At what point do we as parents, not as teachers, at what point do we as parents step back and go, I believe that my child has enough maturity that I would like for them to be able to make some decisions on their own, whether or not I agree with them. I'll share something with you kind of funny. My father was a professor at Georgia Tech. He taught math. And he had a parent of a college student want to talk to him about his college student's grade in the class. And my dad, and when this happened, I was already teaching. But my dad says to the parent, he says, with all due respect, I believe that this is a conversation you need to have with your son, not with me. Because they were concerned about his grade. He says, I'm concerned about his grade too, which is why I will reach out to him. So as high school students that have that choice, when is it appropriate, do you think, to allow them that autonomy to make those choices for themselves? I know what I chose to do as a parent, but I'm curious to see what our agreement is here. That's hilarious. So what do we think here? Now I know that we only have a couple of high school folk here. Kiana, what grade level do you teach?
I teach kindergarten.
Okay, okay. So I know Brittany is high school and Adam is kind of an overseer with high school. Christina, you're middle school, correct? Are you elementary? Okay. And I know the rest of us, correct me if I'm wrong, the rest of us except Shelby's middle school, right? And the rest of us are elementary?
I'm middle school and
Oh,
college.
right. All right. Amanda and Matt are both middle. Right. Let's see. Guided choice. Yeah. Matt, I completely agree with you. The idea of a choice board is a great thing for elementary kids and middle kids. Yeah. One thing that I found to be really, really helpful is to have those conversations and to know what your child is learning about, and those are things that as a teacher, I would promote, with my classes, like, please talk to your parents about this, have these conversations because that's really where it needs to happen because we need to see where we believe, as a family, where we are. I'll tell you right now, my parents were ultra, ultra liberal. I'm liberal. They were embarrassingly liberal, like more than me. That's not a bad thing, but it took me a while to be like, whoa, like, I don't know that I'm on board with all that. Right. And some people, it's the other way. Some people, their parents are way more conservative than them. That's probably more common. Right. But, it's family dynamics that really don't need to be brought into the school. And again, this whole statement here about I will go to the school board and the media, I take great contention with that. Anytime I've had a parent say I will go to the school board and the media, I would say, here is the number, ask for Tom. Tom is my buddy who's on the school board, lived across the street from me for 20 years. We're good friends. Tell him what tell him, tell him this and tell him how you feel and, realize he's an elected official and he will listen to you. But again,
I had a student where when the student was at school, the student wasn't the problem. The parent was always the problem. And I think in an entire semester of having the student, I only saw them maybe 5 times. And I had to send home like alternate assignments of what to do, blah, blah, whatever. Anyway, the grown-up was angry because by the end of each quarter, the student had a 0 in class because they weren't doing anything. They weren't turning anything in. There was nothing. And I only gave them 30% of the workload. It's not even like I sent home 100% of the workload. I did 30%, just trying to get something. Mm-hmm. And I kept sending my follow-up emails. And my principal actually told me, because this particular parent it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when the next suing of the school district was going to occur. She was like, well, to try and prevent all that, because she'll go to the media, she'll sue the district, blah, blah, blah. Just go ahead and pass the kid. And I went, absolutely not. That is not, no, I can't prove that the student passed. So if this goes to court and they start digging through, that then calls into question my ethics as an educator and puts my license at risk because now I'm doing something unethical. Mm-hmm. So absolutely not. So I made sure to kind of save all of my documentation. I mean, I had read receipts on everything, but the grown-up never responded back. And do you know, I was the only teacher that didn't get a court summons to go and sit in court all day. But all the other teachers that had been bullied by our principal to kind of lie about some of the grades, they all got called in.
Mhm.
I didn't have to deal with a single bit of it.
Yeah, I had a principal ask me to change a grade once, and I, like you, I had all of my receipts backing myself up for what I said, and I said, listen, if you believe that the child's grade needs to change, by all means, you may change it. I will not change it. According to my records, of which I am responsible, this is the grade that the child earned, not was given. If you would like to give the child that, then that can be your decision. You're my boss. That principal, by the way, went to jail for the Atlanta testing scandal. Know who you're working with, right? Okay, so who have we not heard from? Let's see, Julie, do you have a take on this? Monica, Latoya, Adam, I'd love to hear your takes on this.
I think I was getting a little bit too detailed because I wanted to know, was it a student, the parent was a parent of one of the students that chose that, or was it another parent in the class? And that might not matter.
It doesn't say
It
in
probably
the
doesn't matter.
discussion. I read it as one of the parents of one of the students in that group, but
Yeah.
it very well could have been
I
one of
felt
the.
like, sorry. Yeah. I just thought like if it was the parents of the students who were actually doing it, then they didn't have a problem with it. It was somebody else in the class that was having a problem with it, with the students weren't even studying
That shouldn't
that
matter.
religion, but I don't think it matters. But as a principal, obviously I'd make sure that the parent, I think everything had been said that I was already thinking that,
Okay.
making sure that, the teacher had crossed all of their T's and dotted their I's as far as a syllabus and letting them know ahead of time and parents knew about it and all of that. But again, like promoting other religions, like what Matt said, I teach in a fairly suburban school with a lot of rich families that we kind of joke that they run the school. The PTA is very strong at my school.
Mhm.
And they do have a tendency to think that they get to make decisions like that,
Mhm.
about curriculum and all. And so you have to have a good principal to kind of stand up to that. And we do, luckily, we do.
Good.
But it would be kind of, hey, making sure that the teacher one had done their job, their due diligence, but then, bringing up, we have a fairly religious school, I think. We do have the moment of silence, and the pledge. We do all of that. But yeah, I didn't really have much to add. That's why I hadn't said anything.
That's
Everybody's
okay.
kind
It's
of
okay.
agreeing with what everybody has already said.
Let's hear from the Brookses.
Well, again, let's piggyback on that. Everybody kept saying what I said, but the first thing when I read it, was that as a principal, I would want them to come to me first, and get I'm sorry, as a principal, I would want a principal to come to me as a teacher and make sure we're on the same side, to get the rubric for the assignment, that kind of thing, so they can go to bat for me against the parent. So as a principal, I would definitely talk to the teacher first.
Good. Good. I think you froze up there for a second. Latoya. I'm going to get Adam as soon as we unfreeze. Monica, we got some input here.
Hi, so I just want to say that I heard everyone's thing, but realistically, I currently started at a magnet school this year,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, parents have a lot of say. Like, believe it or not, they have a lot of say, and you will get called in the office, and you can get in trouble. So I guess it just depends on where you currently teach or where you currently um preside in your county or your position or whatever. But I'm a teacher, and I've had a principal try to go to bat for teachers, but the parents still had the last say so. So I guess it just depends on the situation. But me, I would totally, try to go to bat for the teacher, you and see everything that's going on. But I've also been in a situation like this in the parent one. So I don't really know like what's the right and wrong way of doing it. I just know like I guess it all comes down to a power thing in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever has the most control at the time in the certain situation.
This whole discussion to me reads as a power play.
Yeah, most definitely. So I'm always like, well, who has the most power at this point? Because you can fight all day long and then it'll still not go your way. So you can do the right thing all day long and the person in the wrong can still win. So
Mm-hmm.
it really just depends.
Yeah. Okay, good, Monica. I appreciate that. Adam, you got some input here?
Yeah, we're back now. We had, I guess, a little power flicker here. But I'm gonna let Toya finish first, and then I'll oh, sorry, she's finished. So you
Mm. It's amazing how stoic he can be, isn't it? It's like a statue.
is frozen.
Oh, that was what it was. Got it.
Okay. In the prompt it said promote, and nothing about the assignment was promoting a religion. So if I'm the admin, I'm leading with that. This is a great opportunity for the admin to kind of have some backbone on the situation and stand up for the teacher. So yeah, that's number one. There's nothing about investigating or researching a particular thing is promoting one thing, and actually it's almost the opposite. You know what I'm saying? You're learning about something, um, so you can make an informed decision about whatever. So that's that. And then the principal standing on that, having some backbone, um, does more uh for the teacher and for the school climate than they probably.
Mm-hmm. You're frozen again, man. All right. Adam is making some fantastic points. One thing that I love about having Adam in here is Adam does have that administrative lens that he's able to see things through in the role that he has. Are you still doing that, Adam? If you are, you can, when you stop getting frozen, you can shake your head yes, and we'll know. But I know that Adam has had the opportunity this past year to be a coach for fine arts. Yep, good. Are you doing that again next year? Yeah.
So that's my new job now.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I left the band room for that job. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, there's some districts have done that where it's a rotating position. I love that they're doing that with you. That's good.
I'm appreciative.
Yeah, man. So let's see. Yuri, you have 2 cents to throw in here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would just assume, again, I think somebody else mentioned it's probably in the Georgia standard somewhere to learn about different cultures, religions in a social studies setting. That just would make sense to me. And knowing how, Islam, yes, is a big religion, but so is Christianity, Judaism. There's other religions. So I would assume that there's other groups of students also studying and presenting on other religions. So I don't know how I would be, I don't know, this is the snarkier side of me, would be questioning like, what are you afraid of your students learning other religions? Like you think that they're going to be converted, which is ridiculous. But I wouldn't say that to the parents, of course, but that's just what I would probably be thinking. But I would just, I think others have said it, try to make sure that get the perspective of the teacher, understand what the assignment was before moving further along with the parent. But just at first, I would just say, thank you for letting me know. I don't want to upset the parent. Of course, I just want to make sure that their concerns are heard and understood. And it's my job as the administrator to make sure that they are feeling confident in our educators in our schools. So I would first make sure that I understand that their concerns, and then I would go talk to the teacher, find out, what is the assignment and all of that, and then go back to the parent again and say, from what I have seen in the evidence, there is no proselytizing of any particular religion. It is a very objective manner of presenting and studying different religions of different cultures, because religion is a major factor of different cultures. So I would kind of go along with it at that kind of perspective for the parents.
Nice. I mean, you brought up social studies, and I mean, in social studies, every war that's ever been fought in this world of which we live has been over money, property, or what people believe in. I mean, those are and those are big topics. It's very hard to reconcile a war when people believe that they have a divine right to whatever it is that they're fighting for. And which is why, there are some wars that have gone on for hundreds of years. When we learned about the Vietnam War, we just assumed that it was based on how long the US was involved. That war had been going on for over 100 years before we ever stepped foot. Right? And same with the Korean War, I mean, lots and lots of wars. They just kind of kept going. And then once we got involved, that's when we started talking about it. Now, I will say, with this, and this is the type of talking about law and ethics. This social studies teacher is completely covered as far as that goes by the law. The teacher is covered. The way that it's presented here, the teacher followed all of the correct protocol. I will say, one thing that they teach folks in business is you want to stay away, and I'm sure your parents taught you this as well. Topics that you want to avoid in conversation: religion, politics, and money. Right? Because everybody feels that everybody tends to have a strong opinion on those three things, and tends to take it personally if you're not in agreement with them. And it's wild, but in the past, 8 years or so, 10 years, people have identified their religious beliefs with their political beliefs in some cases. It's crazy to me, but that has become a thing. Now, the best thing we can do in education, now assignments like this, and I'm pointing at my screen over here, assignments like this have a place in the classroom. And it might not be a comfortable place, but it is a place, and it's a place that belongs in the classroom. As educators, we will get the most by being as bipartisan as we can, or even more than bipartisan, because when you're talking about religions, there's a whole bunch of them. It's not about what you believe, it's if you believe, right? It doesn't matter to me who you believe in or what you believe in. Let's agree that we have something to believe in, and take it from there. But again, in this particular case, it was something that was studied already, and these students are digging deeper based on what they chose. There's really no further argument than that. All right, let's go into our scenario today. This one is a lot. Okay, so buckle up, and I'm gonna break us into groups for this one. Okay, so it is the middle of the school year, and you've just been appointed as principal of Conservative High School, home of the Fighting Crusaders in Christian City, Georgia. Interesting. This is very tongue-in-cheek, eh? Mr. Self-Righteous is a tenured English teacher and serves as a part-time pastor at one of the local churches. During your first classroom observation, you notice a Bible prominently displayed on his desk. He is completing a unit on persuasive writing. The topic assigned to students is why I love Jesus and the importance of church in my life. He tells class that the writers of the best 3 essays will receive a Gideon's Bible. Later the same day, you discover that Mr. Righteous leads a Bible study and prayer group each Wednesday morning at school for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. That afternoon, you are approached by a student who wants to form an LGBT club as soon as possible. You tell the student you will check into the request and get back to him in a week or 2. While doing research, you discover that last year, in the middle of the school year, 2 new clubs were formed, the Gospel Singers and the Beta Club, and both meet after school every Thursday immediately after the school day has ended. As a perfect ending to your school day, you get a call from the ACLU inquiring about the basketball coach leading the team in reciting the Lord's Prayer at the start of each basketball game, and that a cross insignia is stitched on the side of the pants uniform. To ensure that Conservative High School is in compliance with federal laws, what action do you as principal take? Okay, be sure to support your answers with court cases and laws, including Kennedy versus Bremerton 2022. Here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to have 3 groups. Okay, group 1 is going to talk about the essay, Why I Love Jesus and the Importance of Church in My Life, with the grand prize being a Gideon's Bible. Okay, for the top 3. Our second group is going to be talking about our student who wants to form an LGBTQ plus whatever club as soon as possible. And our third group is going to be the ACLU, talking about the Lord's Prayer and crosses on the basketball uniforms. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to open up some breakout rooms. You can choose which room you want to be in. So room 1 is Gideon's Bible. Room 2 is LGBT. And room 3 is Lord's Prayer. Okay? You can put yourself in whichever room you want. I'm opening the rooms right now. Yes, Tammy.
Do we assume that this is a public school?
This is a public school. And yes, you can say wow.
How do we choose a group?
You'll go to whatever room and click on join.
Okay.
So we're still waiting on Kiana. All right.
Okay, that was what I was trying to get at.
Yeah,
Because it kind of matters if it's a Christian private school. It
right. It would be different.
does kind of sway it one way or the other. But if it's a straight up public school, yeah. So somebody go.
I can't remember which.
This is the start the LGBTQ.
Yeah, but
Club.
I'm trying to think of which amendment it is and which clause it is that basically says if there is a club for ABC, there must be a club for XYZ. Like it has to be equal. Now
Right.
I can't think, of course, I can't think of which amendment, which clause that was.
I'll look it up. If you want to go ahead with the discussion.
Yeah, because I mean, it would only be fair that like if a student, if there was two clubs that also had permission to
If you wanted to maybe choose that writing prompt, you could. Or like maybe you could list out why I love a certain sports team, or why I love having an older brother or sister, or why I don't love having an older brother or sister. Because if it's persuasive essay,
Right.
then there the writing prompts are endless there. And just because the teacher happens to be conservative and is giving away
Bible.
a Bible, that you cannot have that type of writing assignment as the sole writing assignment. That's why I think maybe having a nice plethora of topics that kids can choose from, because there will be some kids that will choose that topic, and there'll be some kids that want to do a persuasive essay on why they don't like having an older brother.
Well, and they could even make it a little more general. So instead of it being so specifically of why I love Jesus and the importance, it's pick something in your life that you really care about, that's a really big part of you, and talk about why it's so important in your life. And then that opens it up to, it could be religion, it could be my friends, my family, whatever. And then that way it's
there wasn't like a scheduling conflict or anything. It just said that
No, it did. It didn't say anything about a scheduling. It just said what day the fellow Christian athletes club met, but it did say it met after school. So I will say I would always, like, if I were asked, I would be on a committee or a club, like jointly. I would never do it by myself. But also I wouldn't be the one to advocate for it, because then at that point it could be conceived as an agenda, and it's a very unfortunate situation, because there are students that would benefit from the club. But it's when you're in ultra conservative,
Right. But you've got students who are wanting that club, which means there's an interest.
I would say I would let the advocation come from the parent. Because if it comes from the teacher or the students who are minors, it could be like you're grooming your students or you're promoting this agenda. I would just say, if this is something you're interested in, maybe it's something we could bring up at the next like PTO meeting or something like that. That way it doesn't seem like a surprise attack,
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Yeah. So I think it should come from the parents. If that's something the parents want, then, and if the parents don't want it, then maybe you could get with the counseling team, and maybe if they have
And a really big thing in their house is education. So they're not going to be combative about that, or they'll be hesitant to be combative because they're taught, go to school and you do what the teacher tells you to do, period. But it puts them in an uncomfortable position, especially when it comes to their faith. But then when I start thinking about like putting kids in uncomfortable positions, I mean, technically, like, we should be doing that also. Like, it's unfortunate that it's uncomfortable to some kids, because I just think about now, like how they're kind of they're narrowing the focus in history courses about what they can teach, even though like there's literal proof that these things have happened and it's a part of history. So I think it's a very slippery slope when you say, okay, well, you can't tell them, to say, why Jesus. Obviously there should be a choice, right? But I don't think it should be that specific. But my argument would be that it puts some kids in, in a space where they're not comfortable. But again, life is uncomfortable. So sometimes you have to address those things. And obviously school is definitely for academics, but it's also a social space where they learn how to interact with others in a social arena. And that's the biggest thing with like kids who weren't in school during COVID. Like, you can tell Like the socialization is not there. They don't read social cues well. They don't know how to respond in certain situations. So it's super important that, you know, yes, while school is academic, it is also a social space. So they have to learn how.
I would just make sure that, you
Mm.
know, protocol is followed, starting from the board
Yeah.
office down. Like,
And
check to
the
see
the
how.
students do still have a voice, not to cut you off, but the students do still have a voice. So if it isn't enough of them, of course, they'll be heard. But like she said, if there's like two, okay, give it with the parent, counselor or something. But I think it just depends.
I would think anybody under 18, I would not chance saying, hey, this group of students, go see if we can get this club started, because that you could really get into some serious backlash from parents, you know.
Oh, yeah, I totally understand that.
So
But
Yeah.
the way the scenario reads is, sorry, go ahead, Yuri.
I was just gonna say, but those two students could also fight back and be like, you're taking away our civil rights to be able to express ourselves. So like, I mean, you could go the other way too. Like,
yeah,
Yeah,
You might
that's
get
why
in trouble
I
no matter
said
what you
then
do in
why.
this scenario. It seems like the principal might get in trouble no matter what.
That's why I said it's a thin line, because either way, someone's gonna get the downfall of it all.
Right. Let me pause you guys for 1 second. I'm going to go over to the next room in just a second and tell them the same thing. You guys have about a minute and a half to select your champion or tribute, whatever it might be, who would like to share what it is you guys talked about with the group when we get everyone back together. Okay. I'm going to go back and tell them that, and then I'm going to close the rooms. It'll be about a minute from now. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
so
Carry on.
Like
Yeah,
if you just had them, like, I mean, like you were saying, like you go to church and you're there. Maybe they have a whole bunch of Bibles sitting around. Like I would feel anytime there's literature sitting around, I feel terrible about like throwing it out. Like I will hoard some literature, and the Bible is the type of literature. Like if we had 100,000 at my church, and they were like, "Hey, do you know anybody who might want these?" Like I wouldn't hesitate to say, you know, I know that there's a club or whatever, and if the kids want it, but definitely not as a incentive, right?
No, that would be more something of like, you know, if you contacted guardians or something and said, hey, I've got a bunch of these,
Right.
at church. Do you want me to send some home with your student? You know, that'd be one thing, but giving them
to incentivize it makes it seem like it's the right thing.
Right. And
and then what's not spoken, the unspoken thing is that everything else is not right.
Right. I'll give you guys just
Yeah,
one
this
quick
is
second.
just a lot. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Tammy. All right, so in a moment, I'm going to close the room. So you guys have about a minute to finish this up. What I'd like for you guys to do is decide who in this group will become your champion or tribute. Depending. Thank you for getting my literary reference. Who will be either the champion or the tribute to present to the entire group when we get back together in about a minute. Okay, so once I leave this conversation, I'm going to close the rooms. It takes a minute for you guys to wind down. Is 1 minute okay? Do you need more than that? Okay. All right, then. I'll see you guys in another minute.
I have a question, Dr. Krosner. What if someone said no, they were not okay with you recording? What would happen?
they'd have to escape. I don't know. Maybe they'd have to
Muted.
everything asynchronous.
You're muted.
All right. If I did not have the consensus to record, the options that I could do is I could have the student who didn't want to be recorded to take themselves off camera. They in Zoom, you can change your name if you wanted to. Or I just simply I just wouldn't record, and I would, I would post some notes at the end of, kind of an overview of what we talked about. And that is a good question. It is a legal right. You can say no. But my responsibility is to disseminate the information. The easiest way for me to do that is through video, and it's the most thorough way. But, as we know in education, a lot of times the easiest way isn't always the way that we get to do stuff. All right, so we've got everyone back in here, and before we call upon our champions, I found it very interesting that nobody wanted to touch the basketball team. And the crazy thing is that actually, now maybe not the cross on the pants in the public school, but the Lord's Prayer being said at the beginning of a game, that happens like a lot. I don't know about basketball games, but man, I spent a good portion of my career at football games, and it happens. And what do? It never bothered me, and I was never in a place where it bothered other people. And the weird thing about sports, and if you have a child that plays sports, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We get very worried as parents. If I say something, my kid's not gonna, my kid's gonna get the bad end of this. So you get a call from the ACLU inquiring about the basketball coach leading the team. Okay, so what does that say about the team? And whose parent called the ACLU, and is that kid gonna be punished for it? If not by the coach, by the other players on the team who have loyalty to the coach. It's a very uncomfortable situation to be in. And I will say that's twofold. Shame on the coach for bringing that into play. Shame on the parents for going after the coach for it. It's not good on any level. And it's not victim blaming. If I was as the parent, would I say something? I might, because I believe that firmly. But again, that's still really, really hard for my child to have to deal with. And
so technically, though, because it would be an after-school activity, if a student led the prayer, it would be okay, but not the coach leading the prayer, right?
It all depends on how you want to do it. If the student led the prayer and it was after school hours, but it's still on school grounds, they're
but we're
still
allowed
wearing
to
the school uniform representing the school.
I see, because I was going to say they're still allowed to have student-led religious clubs and activities
Yes, they are.
on school property. They can't be discriminated against for that. But
for a basketball game, you sell tickets.
That's fair.
You don't sell tickets for these clubs. And as silly as that sounds, it is a big business. Just about every school I've been to in the past several years, just with my kids going through school, they've moved to online tickets, where you scan a QR code at the door and you buy your ticket right there. They don't have cash or anything. So it's it's an industry. Mm-hmm. Now, technically, and that's why my music teachers know this, the importance of copyright. If you go to a football game and the band is playing the the Macarena, you better have the rights to the Macarena, because if you don't, Los Lobos can, or whoever the Rio del Rio or whoever it was that wrote the song, they can sue you. Because your kids, regardless, were for those few moments professional musicians, because everyone in attendance that heard that performance paid to be there. That's a whole, we're going to get into that when we go into copyright later on down the road, but let's get back over here into our scenario. So the first one that we had was the writing assignment where you can get a Bible if you have one of the best essays. So our champion for that group was who? Okay, let's hear it.
So I picked this prompt because I am the FCA sponsor at our school with another teacher. And we actually do give out Bibles, but we only give them out during FCA for students that want them. But the big concern was the actual writing prompt. If it's a persuasive essay, that prompt can be, you can create numerous prompts. If the teacher really wanted that prompt, they could have had other prompts and students could have chosen which one they wanted to do, or they could have taken it out entirely. The second issue is that some students, Brittany mentioned, some students are not combative, so they'll just do it and they won't say anything. And some student, and that could be pose an issue. And then some students could, it just depends on what's going on in your home life. But the other thing was, the incentive for doing an assignment well is the grade. It shouldn't be a Bible or something else like that. You shouldn't be incentivizing for something like that, because if someone's not a practicing Christian and they write a really good essay, they don't want a Bible, they want a good grade. And so that kind of becomes a little bit more problematic. You're giving out a Bible for writing a good religious essay in a public school. And there's like I said, as a practicing Christian, I would still have an issue with that, because so much of what we do with religion has to be done before or after school. It's on school grounds, but it can't be done during the instructional day. And writing a persuasive essay on why you love Jesus is taking place during the instructional day as a part of that specific ELA or history standard. So there's there were different options that I think that teacher probably should have chosen. And it would be good if the principal sat down with that teacher and maybe explained all that with them, and saying, if you do something like this again, it could really, really backfire if it hasn't already, because there are some parents, because I know we've talked about parents going behind teachers' backs doing this. There's some parents that they start building cases. Like they start building a case against a teacher. They won't say anything. They'll just collect all these little things, and then it explodes and manifests. And yeah, so I've experienced that full on. So I think that was kind of our way that we came at it.
Takeaways that I got from that, we said the club that I lead with someone else. Whenever you're leading a club, if at all possible, if it has anything that could be considered any type of taboo subject or subject that might bring up any rise of questioning, having another person there is critical. And the same would go for the LGBTQ club. I wouldn't want to be the only one there. Because again, exactly, CYA. Yep, that's what you're doing. And FCA is a recognized organization. It is a very well respected organization. As you were in your rooms talking, I heard one of the conversations said, well, the church might have 100,000 Bibles or something, and they want to get rid of them. Could I take them and give them away to students if they wanted them? You could. I would recommend, if the church wanted to get rid of them, to tell the church to do that. Come by our church and get a free Bible. Now, as your teacher, if you wanted me to put a flyer up somewhere in the building that said, hey, St. Anthony's is giving out Bibles, cool. You know? But I don't know. That's, again, that's for you guys to decide how you would handle that. Let's look at our second scenario, which was the LGBT club. Who was the champion of that one? Matt, let's hear it.
We had a lot of good discussion. We agreed on a lot of things, but there is a fine line. So considering the school that you're working at, you do want to let the students know that there's a process, you know, that this is not something that, hey, I want this club and automatically it becomes a thing. But there is it's a combination of like the First Amendment and the Equal Access Act, where fair treatment of all students and student clubs. And so what we would do is see what the protocol is at the district level for initiating clubs, because there's probably an application that you're going to have to fill out, that you're going to have to talk about what's the club's purpose, what activities are you going to do, how does it align with the school, and then you're going to have faculty sponsors. And I mentioned, and exactly what you said, I said, as a faculty member, one, I would not initiate this club, like going to students and trying to see who's interested. And second, I wouldn't sponsor the club without someone else, because at that point, it's very one-sided and it could seem like a grooming situation, or, you know, you're trying to, you know, persuade what's going on in this club. But just let the students know that, you know, you hear them, you hear their desires for wanting to do this. There's an application, you have to have a sponsor, it has to be open to all students. LGBTQ, it doesn't matter if you don't have to identify as that, you know, so it's not like they have to check a box saying that, yes, I am one of these in order to join. It has to be open to all students. And they have to submit it for review and approval process. But we did some research. There's Board of Education versus Mergens in 1990, where it was in violation of the Equal Access Act. And so schools have to be open to creating clubs for all students, regardless of what it may be. They may make the approval process a little difficult, you know, and they may not make it easy for you depending on the school, but it is something that can be done, and is obviously, you know, there are court cases that prove that. So
Good. Yeah, and I know in Forsyth County that the high schools all had a club called the Gay Straight Alliance. Which, you know, I didn't have an opinion either way on it, but I do, as I was reading this, I was like, oh, you know, as very conservative county, Forsyth, that does exist there. I thought, well, you know, if I figure if that, the county that at one time was on Oprah, you know, that shows some forward thinking, at least. All right, so do we have any last minute? I'm going to stop sharing.